All right, you're watching Boomtown, a podcast about Huntsville's explosive growth, both on and off the arsenal. I'm Cameron Walker, your host. I'm the broker owner of Cameron Walker Realty, located right here in Huntsville. And you're joining me and my co-host, Megan. Love that you guys are here. We ask that you subscribe so we can keep you informed of everything that's going on in Huntsville.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Megan Hines, and I'm here with Cameron, and we are Cameron Walker Realty. Well, he's Cameron Walker. I'm Megan Hines, and this is the Boomtown Podcast. And today we are going to get to talk about something I think is really important to talk about, which is where you're actually going to live if you move to the area. And it may sound strange to say, but what is Huntsville? Where does Madison? This is this odd, Northern Alabama place that you've never been to, possibly. Where is everything, and what are the differences between them, and where might you like to end up?
Yeah, I mean, great point, right?
Yeah.
Huntsville's kind of like a water balloon that somebody poked in a few different spots and it started leaking out. And this doesn't have the clearly defined edges that you might see in some other parts of the country or other cities.
Yeah. When I first moved here, I never knew where I was. Yeah. I mean, I was very confused. It was I didn't, because Madison and Huntsville sort of bleed together. Mm-hmm. And Owens Crossroads, is that even a separate place, or is it part of Huntsville? Because
all depends on what we're referencing, right?
Absolutely.
So there's from a tax standpoint, it's in a different tax rate, but the kids go to Huntsville city schools.
Yes.
They use some county services, some city services. I know I had a home buyer a couple of years ago when their appraisal was completed. The inspector put Huntsville instead of Owens Crossroads or vice versa. And we couldn't go to closing on time until the inspector, corrected that. And it was the city inspector. It wasn't like a home inspector. So, and then, you're fighting City Hall to get them to change something the way they do it, but you're also fighting City Hall with the lender. So yeah, it does get these little gray areas and overlaps can become a problem.
Yeah. And so just so everybody has this sort of like pictured in their minds, we have Huntsville, which actually Huntsville City is in one place, but Huntsville is annexing land all over the place. And if you look on a map, you'll see that Madison is actually surrounded by Huntsville on almost all sides.
Yeah.
And then if you keep going west, you come to Athens. So it goes Huntsville, Madison, Athens toward the west, and then on the other side you have Owens Crossroads, which is over this little mountain range that includes Monano and Green Mountain. So you have mountain views when you come into Owens Crossroads. It's sort of a valley surrounded by mountains. And then if you go north, you have Meridianville and Harvest north of all of these. So I hope you can picture that. If not, get out a map.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my favorite tool for mapping out Huntsville is Google Maps. Yes. So if you go to it on the computer and you just bring up Google Maps and then type in Huntsville, it's going to actually outline it in a little bit of red, and it's going to be somewhat gray. Mm-hmm. And so that'll show you, and it's just a big donut, and Madison's in the middle of the donut hole. And then to your point about annexing land, it seems like not a week goes by that Huntsville doesn't annex thousands of acres from a surrounding county or city or municipality. And if you just go into Google and you type Huntsville annexes, look at how many news stories comes up. And about a year and a half ago, Huntsville became the most populous city in Alabama. And it's not that we're the most populous metro area. It's just because city limits have expanded so far with these annexes that it's just by default brought people into the population base. And so it's a little misleading when you look at like Huntsville's size as far as square miles. I think we're even in the top 30 in the nation as far as like geographic size now.
Growing.
Yeah, and growing, right? But it throws people off because we're not a super heavily populated city, but it would appear that we are if you just look at the solid numbers, at least based on Alabama and relative to other cities.
So why is Huntsville trying to eat the world like this, Cameron?
There's so much economic expansion here, right? And Huntsville's done a good job, for the most part, not perfect, but for the most part, of segmenting different parts of town for different industries, right? So we have the Arsenal, very close by the Arsenal. We have Research Park, right? So much is going on there with missile testing, rocket testing, cybersecurity, and everything else. It becomes its own little pocket. There's a lot of manufacturing in our area, both inside the aerospace industries and outside. So we have Toyota, Mazda manufacturing, and then all the little subplants there. We have a lot of logistics, a lot of shipping, a lot of warehousing. And those areas, they don't really want too much cross-pollination with like residential area and industrial. And so what you see is Huntsville annexing these areas so they can bring in these businesses and they can give them a place to call home where they're not trampling on other people's rights or, the nature where they live.
Yeah, it's the same city planning that actually brought us all these amazing city centers and all these things that are more recreational in nature. They're also bringing in businesses that can actually fund those things.
Absolutely, right? And that's exactly how those came, right? Those lands were not part of Huntsville in many cases originally. They were annexed in to create these different city centers and districts. And it expands the tax base, to your point. So a lot of times you'll see an individual business like an anchor store may get a tax exemption, or maybe they get some of their infrastructure paid for, their construction paid for, but because they bring in so many jobs or there's going to be so many more nearby homes, there's going to be so many other nearby businesses, right? It more than offsets that economic expense of bringing in that anchor business. And it allows those of us that are residents here to enjoy, many more fruits of the city's labor.
Okay. So, but you could be living in Huntsville and be really far from the Huntsville city center. That's why it's confusing. So you're looking at a map and you're planning on moving here and you're like, is this Huntsville? And if you're out there at certain parts of Huntsville, you might have to commute quite a bit to get to work, or your whole life might not seem like it's in Huntsville because all the amenities that you use might be in, say, Madison or Athens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And schools are a big problem with that too. So you can have kids that live in one area and their school's so far away.
Yeah.
There are kids that have 30, 45-minute bus rides one way, right? And that's in great traffic. Imagine if it's worse. And another thing is it gets really confusing when people move here because the overlap for things. And an example I like to give is my kids are in Madison City Schools. Their bus comes down. I sold a house a quarter mile from where I live. My kid's bus goes to that neighborhood because there are other kids that go to their school that live in that neighborhood. The people I sold a house to, they are not part of Madison City. They're not part of Madison City School District. But if they had a neighbor next door, that kid would be. And they would be paying Madison City taxes. And that is not the only neighborhood where that happens. And it's not just Madison City Schools and Huntsville City Schools. It can be Madison County. It can be Limestone County. It can be Athens. Oh, there's so many areas where that bleed over happens, right? And if you don't know specifically what you're looking for, go on any of the forums, whether it's on Facebook or Reddit or anywhere else, you will find people literally complaining that they bought a home thinking it was in one school district or tax district and it wound up being in another.
Yeah. And you can check all of these things.
Yes.
We can do it for you if you're working with us, but you can go online. Madison City has a website and there's ways to check your tax rate wherever you are. Now, I would say that if you're moving from most places, your property taxes are going to seem lower this year regardless, but there is a difference between Madison City taxes, Huntsville, Athens, Owens Crossroads.
Absolutely. In the counties, right?
Yeah.
So, and actually Madison County has a great website where you actually have a property tax estimator and you can go in and select from any of those different tax rates.
Yeah.
And that's by locality. So it's not like you don't have to guess which one of 5 numbers is yours. If you're buying in Huntsville, you select Huntsville from the drop-down box.
And, if you live in Huntsville proper, you might get rezoned for a school, but you still are in Huntsville City Schools. If you're in Madison, you're going to be in Madison schools. Athens the same way, but you might get rezoned for the particular school, but you will stay in the school district. That's confusing to people too, I think.
It can be. I will say the exception is if your area is annexed.
Oh.
So can be a difference. I would say that seems to be a one-way street. You're either in county, you get annexed by a city or not.
Yeah, they're not kicking you out of the city.
I don't see that happening, no. And there are definitely areas where, even a house is surrounded by a city and it's unincorporated. And so, I don't know the history behind those things. I'm sure there is one. But I know, there's some areas over by, Rainbow Elementary School where it's, polka dotted where one house is in Madison City and the next house is not.
I always think it's like the movie Up. It's that guy.
Is that guy? Okay. There you go. But yeah, so when you started this, we were, talking about kind of going around the globe, right, around Huntsville. So you just have these different pockets in different areas, and you have areas that have like a local name, but there's nothing actually known. So like I love Monrovia is one of my favorites. I love that part of town. I love driving through there. It's gorgeous, but unless you're a Huntsville local and grew up here, it's just a name on a map. There's no post office. Nobody's address ends in Monrovia 35 whatever zip code, right? So that can be troubling for people that are moving here from elsewhere, and they're like, oh yeah, that's over in Monrovia, and you're like, where?
Yeah, that confused me. I moved here 10 years ago, and people would tell me a place, and I would, I'd be like, wait, I'm in a different city now. Where am I?
Exactly.
And now I have to find Monrovia, which doesn't exist on any maps.
For sure. If you want to start a fight in Huntsville, go into a bar and tell somebody where you think Jones Valley stops.
I'm not doing that.
Exactly, right? Like everybody has their own opinion. Same thing with 5 Points. What is and isn't 5 Points? And Blossomwood, all these little pockets and areas, right? They're just not as clearly defined as maybe they once were. And depending on when you moved to Huntsville and what you were taught was what, like everybody has a very strong opinion on what is and isn't in Jones Valley or is or isn't in Blossomwood.
I think that part of that is because it's grown so much. The Huntsville area has grown so much over the last 20 years. And at one point, these places were separated. There were farmland around these places.
Yep.
So, South Huntsville was mostly farmland 20 years ago.
Yep.
And then it had these little centers and they had names. Now it's developed and everything bleeds together and it still has the names. So if you're coming here from another place, it's confusing.
Yeah.
But just for a little clarification, I would say, if we're starting on the east side in Owens Crossroads, what would you say would be like the reason someone might choose Owens Crossroads to live?
Absolutely. It's gorgeous. It's a valley surrounded by mountains. And then it probably has the easiest access to the multitude of outdoor activities you can do in Huntsville area. You've got hiking, biking, there's even some horse trails over there. You've got the greenways. You've got some great golf courses.
Canoeing, Flint River.
Yep.
Yeah.
Canoeing, kayaking. And then, you and I were talking the other day and you brought up a really good point that it's only about 30 minutes from Gunnersville Lake and the state park there.
I think for me, Owens Crossroads is the perfect place if you're an outdoor enthusiast who still loves, some amenities, like a fancy outdoors person.
Right.
There's really good sushi over there, but you can go hiking all the time.
Exactly, right. I'm over there all the time. I've had quite a few clients over the last couple of years, especially some that did new construction. So I was always over there as their house was coming up. And it's funny, like you can be in the heart of Owens Crossroads and you're 10 to 15 minutes from Jones Valley and all the shopping and dining and everything there and the AMC movie theater and all that. Or you're 10 to 15 minutes from like the medical district in downtown going the opposite direction. Yeah. So, but when you drive out there, you feel isolated, right? Because you've got
feels like
beautiful
you're
mountains,
on vacation.
trees,
the mountain, and
absolutely. And there's more and more buildup out there, but they're nowhere near approaching, like Madison. That's just a sea of neighborhoods, right? So, but I think that's probably the biggest draw over there. And it can be a little difficult for people to delineate. I kind of think of Green Mountain as like kind of you're on one side of it or the other. Yeah. You're in Southeast Huntsville or you're in Owens Crossroads.
Yeah, there is that sort of, there's a little mountain range and Monano goes right into Green Mountain and anything on the east of that mountain range is pretty much Owens Crossroads.
Right.
And and really, as far as you living there, it's not like you're going to be living a completely different life. You're basically part of Huntsville. You're in Huntsville City Schools. You pay, I think it's Huntsville Utilities, right? Mm-hmm. And your tax rate is different. Yep. And you get to say you're in Owens Crossroads. That's the difference. You're part of that team.
So back to our fighting about where Jones Valley ends. Another fight, if you want to start it, is call everything over there Hampton Cove.
Oh.
So it is so too common for people to call it Hampton Cove nowadays. And Hampton Cove is a neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And then just north of that, you've got Bailey Cove. And so people that have been here 20, 30, 40 years, grew up here, whatever, they will reference those distinctly. You have Owens Crossroads, you have Hampton Cove, you have Bailey Cove. People that are new here, they may call it any one of the three. And Bailey Cove's probably the least likely, but they will call anything like within 3 or 4 miles of the Hampton Cove neighborhood, Hampton Cove.
Okay. So then you come over the mountain. Mm-hmm. We're just going to work our way east.
Sure.
In this conversation. And you're in Huntsville proper. And you have, you have South Huntsville and you have North Huntsville and Central Huntsville. Why might someone choose those?
Sure. I kind of think of Huntsville as like 5 distinct areas before I break it down into sub areas, right? Southeast Huntsville, very similar in some ways to Owens Crossroads. You have beautiful mountains, trees, still easy access to outdoor activities, but it actually feels like a suburb within a city. Like it's still the tree lined streets, the sidewalks, the kids out playing in the grass kind of stuff, right? As you make your way further north, you kind of get into that city center area. And I'm going to kind of expand that circle beyond what a lot of people do. I'm going to include like city center, downtown, 5 Points, all that. So you feel a little bit more of an urban area, right? Like your taller buildings, a lot more red brick, a lot more gray concrete, right? But that's also where you're going to find like your inner city condos, your bungalow houses where you're walking distance from everything. Northeast Huntsville, particularly once you get up kind of over Chapman Mountain or Montesano, you kind of come back down into a valley again. But you also have those homes up on those mountains. So really cool there, a little bit different vibe. Northwest Huntsville, gosh, there's so much going on there. So many different vibes there. Like you can't really encapsulate it in one thing. Ton of growth in that area, both commercial and residential. And then Southwest Huntsville, there's only so much can go on there because you have the Arsenal. So you have a little bit of residential surrounding the Arsenal, and then you kind of bleed over into Madison.
Yeah. And so I live in South Huntsville, and I think one of the things that makes Huntsville different from the other areas, South Huntsville is that Huntsville was built up during the space program. So it's got a lot of mid-century homes that are from that time when we had these engineers coming in, and they were affluent and intelligent, and they had a vision for how they wanted the city to look, and they had a vision for how they wanted their homes to look. So these neighborhoods are very classic looking. It's very like almost like these Leave It to Beaver neighborhoods from that era. Yeah.
Yep. And those are spotted around the city. So you can find them in Northwest, you can find them in Blossomwood, you can find them in Southeast, you can find some of them up on Montesano.
Yeah.
And then you can also find, there's a handful of modern homes, right? These, I think they're really cool, but a lot of people don't like them. So, whatever your taste is. But like, my favorite thing to talk about is actually up on Montesano, where you can find a modern home across the street from a log cabin next to a colonial, next to a shanty, right? And so, like, you do have these eclectic places too, where everything's not cookie cutter, and really just non-conforming, right? So the neighborhoods you were talking about aren't cookie cutter, but there are, like, once you get out in the suburbs, more of that. But you can get even more eclectic in some parts of Huntsville.
Yeah, and I have to mention the Montesano neighborhood too, because I think it is one of the most charming neighborhoods in Huntsville. It is pricey at this point up there on top of the mountain, but it really feels like you're on vacation when you get to the top of the mountain. It has this, it's woodsy, and it's got this big state park kind of behind it with views. A lot of the houses have views of the valley. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
I went up there when it snowed, and it was like, Santa's village. I love it.
Absolutely. It's a cool area too, because it's like many parts of Huntsville. It has some really close knit community groups, right? So there's that's an area where you might have a lot of stay-at-home parents and or like homeschooled kids, right?
Yeah.
And so they have kind of a cooperative there where they can help each other with homeschooling. They own shares and some neighborhood amenities, things like that. And then, like you said, your walking distance or biking distance to the state park. And then you have some areas with these stunning overviews, whether you're on one side of the mountain or the other, right? You could be overlooking the city, or you could be overlooking Owens Crossroads some points east.
And I'm gonna say, because I love it there. It has a feel, if you're coming from like Colorado or the West Coast or Oregon, you're going to be surprised at how familiar it feels, because it doesn't have as much of a Eastern feel. It feels mountainous. There's lots of pines, lots of views. It has that pine tree smell that I associate with Colorado. I like it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously the closest thing in elevation we have to that, and that probably does impact some of that too. And then kind of coming down off of that, like you go down into what I consider Northeast Huntsville, right? So the Ryland area, Brownsboro, kind of even getting over a little bit towards Maysville, and then going up into like Newmarket.
And that's really pretty. And I always notice that over there it has like the best sunsets.
It does,
because you come into the flat, and it used to be really all farmland. You still will see like a horse or some goats right next to new construction. So it still has this very homey feel that it feels very southern actually, and it's almost missing. Okay, I'm stuck because I lost the word. And comforting. I would say that it feels comforting out there. It's nice.
Sure.
It's porch. It feels like your lemonade porch, sweet tea, sunset area for me.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's also another area where like you bleed from Huntsville into Newmarket, like just in the span of feet, and even there it can get even more confusing because you might actually be in the county but have a Huntsville mailing address and zip code.
Yes.
And so like that throws a lot of people off. And of course, when I have these conversations with people moving here, we may be looking at a house in a specific neighborhood and they're like, adamant that it's Huntsville. And it's like, no, I understand the name is Huntsville, but like we'll go out and I'll have to bring up some resources for them to realize like, no, this truly is a Madison County school or Madison County tax district. And it just throws a lot of people off because of the name of the city. I'm in Madison too. But so it's one of those areas where the barrier isn't like hard and flush. Like you kind of have to know where it is.
Yeah. And then we're coming down and we keep talking about Jones Valley. Mm-hmm. And let's tell people what Jones Valley is.
Yeah, so Jones Valley is actually the largest urban farm in the U.S. And so it's where Walden Mountain, Green Mountain, and I want to say Huntsville Mountain all kind of meet. And you just have this gorgeous green valley there. And if you come over one of the mountains, like in the spring or the summer, it's just vibrant green, like a green Crayola couldn't recreate, right? And bleeds down, so it's the farm. And then over the years, some of the farmland's been sold off. So there's a big shopping center there and then some neighborhoods, things like that. But like before you get to one of those mountains and drive over it, you'd have no idea it's in there. It's kind of like when you watch a movie and they come over a cliff into a valley. It feels like that.
And I live right by there. So I drive by it every day. And I'll tell you something. I think it's one of the most charming things about this area. There's not very many urban places where you drive down and you see cows in a field and a beautiful little pond and just mountain views. It looks like a postcard.
It does.
And it's in the middle of town. And it's absolutely amazing that they've kept it intact. I hope it stays intact.
I know. And you have some stunning views from above too, because you go up to Blevins Gap, right? Mm-hmm. You can overlook that area, and it's just drop dead gorgeous. So yeah.
Yeah, and that is one of the things about living around here, and I think that whole area where you have the mountains coming down on either side, in the Huntsville side or the Owens Crossroads side, is just beautiful. And if that's your cup of tea, if you need a lot of natural beauty to be happy, that might be where you want to live.
Yeah, for sure. And I've done a lot of videos on that side and the other side of town, right? And that's one of the things I like to point out is if you want mountainous, hilly, those kind of stunning views, you do just about have to be on the east side of Huntsville. You get over to the west side, you have Wade Mountain and you have Rainbow Mountain, but that's really it. It's just flat farmland for as far as you can see. You feel like you're in Iowa or something, Like what's the old joke? If your dog runs away in Kansas, you can see it for 3 days. I think you can do the same thing in Athens.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming down. We've been in the beautiful Jones Valley, and then we're coming. South Huntsville is close to the Arsenal. That should be mentioned too. Is that if that's the part of Huntsville where you have what number is the gate down there? It's gate.
Is it 3 over there? I know 8's over there. I'm just not sure how often it's open.
You could have a job on the Arsenal and live in South Huntsville and have a very easy, fast commute and avoid 565.
Yeah. Absolutely, you can. Now you have to deal with all the stuff that comes from the Arsenal, right? You're going to be closer for the rocket testing. The FBI and ATF have a bomb range down there. So you get some loud noises and some booms and aims.
There. Yeah. And sometimes I think aliens are landing.
For sure.
I find it exciting.
But, like you said, you have easier access to the Arsenal and with people with the back to work orders, like traffic stacking up at the gates. So you're mitigating some of that if you live closer, right? But you also have like Ditto Landing down there. You have easy access to the Tennessee River and points further south. So there's a lot of benefit to being in South Huntsville.
Yeah. The only thing is, though, that there's so much stuff down there that if you don't work in another part of town, you might just never leave.
Right.
You might just be like, I'm with my South Huntsville people in South Huntsville and I don't know anything else.
No. For sure. Now, there are some drawbacks to being down there, too. So you got South Parkway drivers.
Yeah, the Parkway
Shots fired.
It can get back up.
Yeah.
Backed up. It does. And there's always an accident on it.
Yeah.
It gets.
Can be.
There's an accident.
For sure.
Several times a week.
Absolutely.
That's why you stay down there. You don't come back up.
That is cool. Like something unique to that area and kind of off the sides of the parkway is you have these surface like feeder roads, right? So if there is an accident, you can get off and go around it, right? But
Yeah.
it's kind of a unique scenario there with the roadways. I always find it kind of cool.
Now, there's a learning curve to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why because I go around all the time. But when I first moved down there, I didn't know that, and I just sit there.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like we've kind of done a good job of covering South Huntsville. We could do it all day, right? Some areas that I've really been drawn towards recently, and a lot of clients I've been working with are like areas like Midtown, Providence, stuff like that. I've had a lot more interest in those areas recently. Have you had anybody looking at houses over there?
I actually we did look over there. We didn't end up going with that, but the Providence area and the Midtown area are fun, and we have a lot of people moving here for all kinds of different reasons. And I sold a house last year to a young guy. He was 25 and buying his first house, and he was like, "I really want to be around. I want to meet a lady friend. I want to be around people." And it's hard anywhere. And I feel like if you get too far out, it can be challenging if you're looking to mingle.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I've certainly had clients call me and have those same kind of things.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, I did have somebody buy in Providence about a year and a half ago, and she was at the opposite end of the spectrum. So she was later in life and she was looking for a man. And when she actually reached out to me, she was trying to find out more about like 55 plus communities. I told her we have a handful, but they're, small. And when we really got to talking about what she wanted, Providence was really what she wanted. She didn't really care about an age restriction. What she wanted was a close-knit group of people with a lot of different clubs, things to do. She put the active and active adult. And it turned out we went and met with the senior sales rep at Providence. She's been there forever. So she's sold houses to generations worth of people there. And so she knows everybody. So she's able to put us in touch with the book club, with a supper club, a couple of different things that my client was really into, where she could get to meet people and immediately integrate with the social scene there. And she's absolutely loved it. And it is like, again, but if she was over where I live, like once you get past my neighborhood, it's cows and corn.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a lot of places to mix and mingle if you don't have a 12-year-old that's on their bike. And so it does get to be hard without those areas like Midtown and Mid-City and Providence to kind of make those connections.
No, people are so isolated these days. And when you're moving here from there are a lot of people in this area who are not from here because of the nature of the work that a lot of people do, which is the arsenal and tech, and people are transitioning. And it's a huge problem. You see it on Reddit all the time. People are lonely. And these city centers allow for a social lifestyle without being in, say, an environment that is so urban where you might feel like you're dealing with urban problems all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned like Reddit and Facebook, stuff like that. It's, these meetups and stuff are really cool because you have people with different interests. So we're a really nerdy, geeky town, right? So that's pretty easy to find. But, a lot of people like, hey, I want to go meet people, but that don't drink. So the bar scene or the brewery scene isn't really the right fit for me. So having these city centers where there's more than that, right? There's nice restaurants, there's gaming setups, there's all kinds of different stuff, right? It's really important that there's some variety within the social scene. But if you buy on the outskirts of town or out in one of the suburbs, like this, you're going to have to drive in to have access to those. And then because we don't have a ton of infrastructure in place for mass transit or public transit, right? Very little. If you are going out to have drinks and meet somebody, you need to be really careful, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to have that Uber ride home, and so that can be a bit of a challenge for people on the outskirts as well.
So, heading as we're heading further east, we find ourselves in Madison.
Yeah.
Surrounded by Huntsville. It is the gooey center.
Yeah. We're headed west, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I live in Madison myself, right? And I always kind of tease people that like Madison, you can walk from somebody's driveway to a church parking lot to a school to a grocery store and all the way across and never touch grass. Yeah. And but it is like, if you look at it from a satellite view, it is a sea of neighborhoods. And big family draw there. The schools are highly rated, and a lot of people that are moving here, that's something they may have learned before they came. I really love it there, but also I'm more of a homebody when it comes to my home life. So there's not a lot of adventurous stuff to do over there, but there are a lot of parks, greenways. There is still a lot of green space despite there being a lot of neighborhoods. Great sidewalks, awesome places to take our family for walks or bike rides. And then a lot of the neighborhoods there have the pools, the clubhouses, the playgrounds.
Yeah, and there's everything that you would want for your family. Like I'll always Google like a dance class that I want my daughter to go, and there's always more of them in Madison. You know, whether it's like kids karate, dance, archery, basket weaving. I don't know. Like if you want your kid to do something, you can find somebody to teach them that in Madison.
For sure. Absolutely. There's all kinds of classes. Like, I mentioned it on our previous podcast, right? Yeah. My kids are 3-sport athletes. They do dance, cheer, and archery, right? Mm-hmm. In a couple of weeks, we're doing a big math competition over there, and there's just always something. With that said, though, like, I think if you're looking for those bigger activities like the trampoline parks, the museums, outside of the baseball stadium, the sports teams, those are all really going to be in Huntsville. Now, fortunately, it's super close, but it is a car ride in to do those things.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a car ride out to do other things, though.
That's true. For sure.
And the feel of Madison is a little different. Most of those houses were built more recently. Certainly. Yep. Madison, if you go, you can find Madison City Center, and it is this kind of like old Southern looking city center, but it's small. And until like 25 years ago, that was what Madison was. It was just a little thing. And now but it's not going to be annexing because it's surrounded by us.
There's still a little land, they tell them.
Kidding.
But to your point, yeah, right. Like downtown Madison is super tiny, and it's easy to go by without even knowing it's there. So I kind of think of Madison as the old city center and the surrounding neighborhoods there. Then the newer builds, say 10 years or younger, that kind of surround that area. And then also you have 565 that kind of splits it. So you have the older sections of Madison, still some newer there too, north of 565, but just about everything south is brand new until you get down to Triana.
Yeah.
And so like you've got all this new build down there, and it's all really close to the Arsenal. It's all really close to Toyota Field and, the town Madison area. So ton of new construction down that way. But the houses there, like they're on smaller lots. They tend to be smaller homes. So like it's got a whole different feel, look, and vibe than if you go to a 30-year-old home in more central area of Madison.
Yeah. And the other thing is that you might encounter the traffic. If you live in Madison and your commute is toward Huntsville, that's traffic.
Yeah, it is. So it depends. Like I'm on the outskirt of Madison. So for me, like getting into downtown Huntsville is super easy, but it's because I'm not going stop sign to stop sign, red light to red light, all on the outskirt. If you live anywhere in the center of Madison, and especially during school hours when school's out, or say bus hours during rush hour, right? It can be a slog getting through because it's just a grid system that bus is going to stop at every bus stop, plus every stop sign, plus every red light, plus every railroad crossing, right? So depending on where you are in Madison can definitely be a slog. Highway 72 can definitely be a challenge in the morning getting down. So there are definitely parts of Madison where that can definitely be a challenge.
Okay. And then we're heading farther west. Sorry, I got that wrong. And we are found our way to Athens. Yeah. And Athens is the fastest growing city in Alabama right now.
Yep.
Yes.
And leading it to also be part of the fastest growing county, right?
Yes.
And
Limestone County.
Yeah, Limestone County, exactly. So it is the county seat there. Athens is really cool in that if you close your eyes and you think about the old historic southern town with the courthouse and the town square around it, that is Athens.
Yeah.
And so it's really cute. It's easy to get around down there. There's a lot of little shops and restaurants and all kinds of stuff right there around the county courthouse. And so I love going over there for that. And you can get like ice cream, or you can go to a little diner or whatever, right? And it's super cute. Like they do Fridays after 5 in the summer where some of the businesses stay open later. So you can go through and do all that. But then that leads you to a little bit more historic part of Athens. And then you have something that I'd say is more like the 20, 30-year-old part of Athens. It's a little more commercial drive-through, like, your banks, your tire repair shops, your drive-through restaurants and stuff. And then once you get outside of that, there's a little bit more of a suburban feel. And then that bleeds into rural lightning fast.
Yeah.
And so, it's another area where there's a lot of cotton and corn farms that are being converted to neighborhoods. But I would still say there's more farm than neighborhood right now.
Absolutely. And the other thing about Athens, I had some people who are going to be purchasing in Athens, and we looked at everything, and they were like, well, everything we need is here. We don't, if we lived here, we don't need to be commuting to Huntsville. Like, we have our stores, our restaurants, our recreation. So if you live in Athens, Athens is pretty self-contained.
It is, and that's really, I think, part of why it's such a fast-growing area, right? The price point's really attractive too. Another area with highly ranked schools too, but there's two economies. They have the Athens local economy that if you work there, you can be part of, or you could be part of Huntsville or Madison.
Yeah.
And that's a realistic commute for you where it's long for local, but if you're coming here from a higher populated area, it's a joke.
And your cost of living is going to be less. The house you buy is going to be less. You're going to be buying the same new construction, perhaps from the same builder, and it's going to be substantially less than it would be if you bought it in Madison.
Absolutely. And or you get more land. So I actually had two friends that bought houses concurrent from the same builder. Now, they weren't the identical floor plan. One was in Owens Crossroads, one was in Athens. So the people in Owens Crossroads got what I'm going to consider like a more cookie cutter style lot, kind of rectangular shape, quartered to maybe 0.3 acres. And they paid more than the person that got more square footage in a 2.5 acre lot over in Athens, same builder, right? And so very similar fit and finish to the home. So you can either get considerably more house, considerably more land, or significantly lower price.
And because it is the fastest growing city, you're kind of getting in on the ground floor of something. I mean, I would estimate that because it's growing so fast, your investment there is a good one.
People that I sold a house to 3 years ago there have done very well. So I would say like maybe we're on the first or second floor now, but maybe we're still on a 10 floor building, right?
Yeah. I mean, the whole area is growing, but Athens seems to be at the beginning of that, whereas some of the other parts are, we've been growing for a while.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's also a really cool area in that some of the communities there are smaller builders. Maybe they've been here for 30 years, right? So they're not necessarily startups, but they build these small communities. So one I'm thinking of off the top of my head, their sales rep lives in every community they build in.
Really?
So she moves into the initial model. That model is her house. People can walk through during her hours and see the house, and she'll live there for a year, 2, 3 till they finish up. Then she moves to the next community. Like, that's such an Alabama thing, like, I don't think you go to many.
That sounds horrible for her. People knocking on her door all the time. It's like,
she loves it. Well, and like, she's the representative for the builder in the community. Yeah. Like, if you're out walking your dog and, your toilet's not draining, like, they go knock on her door, and that's just the life she signed up for. And, and she brags about it. She loves it. Right. And so that's kind of, you can still find those kind of things in Athens where you're not going to find them in Huntsville or Madison or anything like that. And there's a handful of small builders over there like that.
Yeah. And the one that we haven't mentioned yet, because we're going to need to wrap up, is Meridianville.
Yes.
Let's go back. And that is because it wasn't on our journey west. So we have to come back around to it.
Sure. It's almost due north of Huntsville, right? I would say, like, of the 4 places not within Huntsville city limits that I sell the most homes will be Owens Crossroads, Madison, Athens, and Meridianville.
Yeah.
In Meridianville, if name a builder in our area, they're building there right now. So it's another area where there's a lot of flat farmland that they've converted over to new construction, particularly if you go out on like Steger Road, like you're just going past a new construction community after new construction community. But it's very much a bedroom community. There's not a lot of industry up there outside of farming. If you're living there and you're working and you're not remote or something, you're commuting due south into Huntsville. There's not a lot of restaurants, bars, things like that up there.
I mean, there's a lot of chain restaurants as you're coming.
There's getting more for sure.
Because it's a corridor. You can drive to Nashville through Meridianville. And I think that, I would say the main industry in Meridianville is commuting to Huntsville.
New construction homes. Yeah.
New construction homes. And if you go out there, I actually take people out there when they want to see all the new construction that's available, because you can go to every builder in the area pretty much, because there's that loop and it's just one builder after another.
Yep.
And it's all new construction.
Absolutely. Right. And you can get a lot of home for your money out there, or you can get a very reasonably priced home if you're not looking for something super large, right? And then to a point we both made, there's so many different builders out there. You see a lot of different variety of homes. And it's funny, it all seems to be on the east side of the highway there. Once you cross over to the west side, you're kind of in Tony Hazel Green area, and you're back into like almost exclusively farmland for quite a ways.
Yeah. There's also something to be mentioned. There is an airport out there.
There is.
Yeah, and it's the executive airport of Huntsville. So you might get some airport noise if
For sure.
you buy new construction out there. You're going to be in a flight path. It's not the major airport; it's a smaller flight path, but you will hear airplanes occasionally.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was actually doing some research for another video, and there's a neighborhood right next, like across the street from that airport. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there'll definitely be some noise. And I would say Huntsville has a higher pilot per capita than most areas, right? Just due to the nature of who lives here and works here. So, you're definitely going to get some weekend warriors out there flying planes.
Okay. Well, I think we've been through it. I think that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, unless we go way out somewhere.
No,
I think that covers
people are
the area.
tired of this conversation.
No, I think that covers it. If you have questions about the area or one of these, either inside Huntsville or out, we're glad to answer it. There's certainly areas we didn't cover, but they're not as populous. So reach out to us, drop a comment. We'd be glad to answer any questions you have about the area.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching or listening. You can always catch us on audio on wherever you get your podcast, be Spotify, Apple, or you can watch our video on YouTube. Really appreciate you guys being here. Ask that you subscribe so we can keep you informed of everything going on here in Huntsville.